What the hell does this say? He held his wounded hand, still glowing, up to his mentor. The old man squinted and replied, It says, warning. This podcast contains horror fiction. Contents may disturb you. PseudoPod, episode 624, November 30th, 2018. This week's stories: Flash on the Borderlands, Personal Narratives. Hey everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alistair, your host, and this week is all about personal narratives. I mean, we all have them. They're never quite the genre we think they are, though. Comedy becomes horror, horror becomes tragedy, tragedy becomes musical, or sometimes licensed tie-in, or sequel, or all of them. The exoskeleton of experience we all wear changes and evolves with every experience we have. And for each one of us, it's different. And for each one of us, the truth shifts. But if we're very lucky, the truth never shifts from our gaze, and as long as we keep our eyes on it, well, we'll be fine. That's all anyone can ever hope for, right? That's all anyone can dare hope for, right? This week's stories begin with 10 Things I Didn't Do by Maria Haskins, and read by Rebecca Wassier. So, without further ado, the first of this trio of small, perfectly formed, razor-edged, true stories.
"10 Things I Didn't Do" by Maria Haskins, narrated by Rebecca Wassier. 1. I didn't die. I promised you I wouldn't, so I didn't. I know you said the words in jest when you dropped me off at school. Don't die, honey, with that hoarse laugh and sideways wink you do. But I rolled my eyes and said, Okay, Mom, I promise. And I don't break my promises. 2. I didn't walk home alone. Alicia walked with me almost all the way. I could see the light from our kitchen window in the early dusk when the car pulled over, saw it pass as it drove away with me. I saw that kitchen light with you inside it, bent over the stove and cursing your lack of cooking skills as usual, even when I had to close my eyes to keep the darkness out. 3. I didn't go with a stranger. I knew him, and so do you. He said my name. He knows your name, too. And for a while, when he was getting ready to take me apart, I wondered if he'd speak your name afterwards, if he'd type it into his phone, if he'd call you, if he'd be savoring your name as he savored mine, rolling it over his tongue, swallowing the tenderness and sweetness of it, or if he'd scream it, holler it, bellow it, like when I called out for you. 4. I didn't go into a haunted house. There were no creaking floors or crooked doors, no warped stairs hung with lacy spiderwebs, no eerie swing seat on the porch, no broken windows, no spooky silhouettes behind the curtains, not even one bat taking flight, just stucco and rhododendrons, and inside a shaggy orange carpet that smelled of cigarettes and cats. Wallpaper with flowers in the hall, the kind of stuff Grandma liked, and a tap somewhere. Drip, 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 like blood or tears striking the concrete floor below. 5. I didn't see any monsters. There was no ghost or vampire risen from the grave, no werewolf wielding claws and teeth in fear of silver. There was only a man. For a while, in the light from that flickering fluorescent tube, I thought his face might have been a mask, but if it was, there was nothing hidden underneath. A man. That's all it takes. 6. I didn't stay quiet. I screamed. Did you hear me, Mom? Did you hear me through the shirt stuffed into my mouth, through the bricks and concrete, through the abyss of heaven and the pits of hell that separated me from you. I kept screaming, even after he stabbed into me, after he ran me through, after he wiped his hands clean on his pants. 7. I didn't let him kill me. Death hovered over me. It was a mirror, and in the polished steel of my demise, I saw my spirit slithering out between my lips and teeth, gray and faded, but I wouldn't let it go. I grabbed hold of it, grabbed hold with crooked fingers and dirty nails. I held on and stuffed it down my throat. I swallowed it, choking on every bit of it as it went back into my gut. 8. I didn't kill him. I forced my limbs to animate again. I sucked in the shadows from the cracks and crevices, from the spaces beneath the earth, below the sky. I drank every drop of that darkness to fill my empty veins. I felt rage rippling like scales across my skin, pain turning into fangs behind my lips, grief sharpening into claws growing from my fingers. If I'd been a vengeful beast of myth and legend, I would have grasped hold of him right then and there, would have ripped apart his flesh and soul, would have made him scream, and once he screamed, I would have grabbed that scream and held it in my claws and fangs, would have tasted the salt and tang of it before I stuffed it back into his face to see it ripple through him, loosening skin from flesh, flesh from bone, bone from soul. Instead, he drove me home. In the car, I took every memory I had of you, and I spread them over my ragged skin like a salve, like a balm, like a healing plaster to soothe the ache, to patch the holes he'd made in me. It's holding me together still. 9. I didn't run away. I stood outside our house, blood and rain pooling at my feet. I walked up the steps, my wet feet slapping on the wood and stone. I opened the door. I stood by your bedside. I curled up beside you beneath the covers and the sheets. You woke up and turned on the light. Ree, did you eat at Grandpa's? He told me he was picking you up after school. The bedside lamp shone on my face, and I cowered in its glow. Yet you didn't see my new fangs and claws. You didn't see the wounds that went right through me. You didn't see my scales and scars. You didn't even notice the tattered remnants of my spirit dribbling from my chin. But I saw you, anew. I saw your fangs, your scales and scars, your wounds, your ragged skin. I saw the ancient dried blood on your face and hands. I saw your swallowed spirit heaving beneath your bones and flesh. 10. I didn't tell you any of this. What did you do today, Ree? You asked and touched my scaly cheek as if it were still skin. I flinched. I stayed alive, I said, and hoped it was the truth.
There are certain stories and story types that instantly get my hackles up. The victim narrative is the biggest one by some distance, and we've talked before about what happens when those stories collide with the barrier that separates exploitation and introspection. This story, though, this dances along that barrier, writing beautiful, ornate graffiti like the line about nothing under the mask, or that final sequence. This is a story not about innocence stolen, not about the exploitation of the victim, but focusing instead on the dreadful awareness of maturity, and the knives that self-knowledge holds, the first time you become aware it's waiting for you, out in the dark. Maria actually bears that out in the comments she left for us too. She says, "This was a story that I struggled with while writing it. I wanted it to have a happier, more heroic ending, but the story refused to bend. It stubbornly held on to its darkness." Our second story this week is Egg by Rachel Cassidy and read by Ron John. So one more time, one more true story.
Egg by Rachel Cassidy. Oh, it smells so good and rich and fine. The lion is moving so slow. An egg is crawling out of his skin. He's clutching his tray real tight, and his arms are kind of sore. Egg was 6 once, and maybe his eyes were a little close together. Didn't mean he couldn't see what was up. Didn't mean he couldn't see them pushing the gristly tough bits to the side, giving their nice juicy pieces to those car-faced Johnson kids and Gunderson kids and Walton kids, and dropping that gristle and fat on Egg's tray and looking away. Maybe there'll be gravy too, and maybe they'll give him some. It'll be different today. It has to be. The lion shuffles another inch, and Egg's jaws hurt, he's drooling so much. When Egg was 9, once the mean one with the chin hairs gave him just a bone on his tray. She had hateful eyes. He was so hungry, he cracked it with his bare teeth and sucked on the insides. By the end of the day, he was just about asleep at his desk. He could hardly pick up one foot after the other, walking home past the feedlot where his pop worked all hours fattening up the cattle. It'll be so nice and falling apart, tender, and with the grease that runs down to wipe on the bread and fills a person right up. There has to be enough today. There has to be. If he stands on his toes, he can peer over shoulders and see the steam rising off the trays under the lamps, and is rocking a little bit, but not so much the ladies will notice and turn away. There is no one behind him and the lion. The kids are filling up the tables, laughing and tearing and chewing with sharp white teeth and shouting and roughhousing with friends. Their trays overflow with meaty scraps and crumpled napkins. Egg was 12 once, but that was last week, and now is older. He can nearly taste it, the way it will shred between his teeth, the way it will lay heavy on his tongue, how the salt and the spice and the rich dark flavours will linger after he swallows real slow and takes time with every single bite. There's maybe a dozen kids left in the line, the other ones who eat last, but not as last as Egg. He's doing math and counting the pieces left under the lamps and humming a little bit, quiet and high, tapping the count on his fingers with every piece and every mouth, and with every one that goes on the tray. Egg hums and taps, and his breathing gets a little more ragged. There's so few left, like always, taunting him with their juicy, savoury deliciousness. But maybe, just maybe today. Egg is more than 12 now, and yesterday he protested. Made a mewling noise when the gristle flopped carelessly onto his tray, and the mean one, the one with the chin hairs, she hissed at him. And then he needed to be quiet, hid in the dark for a while. But then she walked in the closet, and he moaned, and she was fumbling for the light switch, and then there was something heavy and long in his hand, and it fell, and her hateful face was all crunching and wet and red, and he couldn't hardly hold the mallet, slick with blood, but it kept falling. And then her mean eyes didn't see him any more, and he threw away the mallet, with its face of pointy pyramids, gummed up with shreds of flesh, and Egg sank to his knees, and he shook all over. There it is. bathing in the glow of the heat lamp, roasted crisp and brown on the edges, rosy and warm in the centre, its glorious meaty aroma wafting. One last piece, no bones, no gristle, no fat, just one perfect serving. When Egg stopped shaking, he came out and he saw the shining metal fridges, full of silver trays, filled with the next day's roasts, resting in marinades, waiting for the ladies to come in the morning and light the gas burners like they do with their lighters and their little tins of butane to fill them, and they'll smoke their cigarettes and slow cook the meats, and come lunchtime, Egg will be last in line, like always. Tomorrow, there will be an extra roast in there. One perfect serving, and Egg watches it settle onto his tray, and the juices spread, soaking into the bread, and he's giddy with the smell. He cuts a piece, small and delicate, and lifts it to his mouth. It is delicious.
I've been Egg. I still am sometimes. Doing what I do requires walking a razor-thin line between gladiator and mouse. Being a physically big guy who's articulate means walking an even thinner line between apparent threat and easy victim. I don't always get it right. Even now, I still have days when all I want to do is hide at the end of the room and wait for the day to be over. This year I've had rather more of those than I would like, thanks to the trash fire the world has become and a series of professional obstacles. All of them have good stuff on the far side, but none of them have had it on the near side, however much I may wish that to be the case. So, as always, over I go, whether I want to or not. And the thing is, on the other side of the wall, there's usually some moment of peace, something good, occasional cake, but getting there is, at times, very tough. I'm very lucky. I don't lash out, I don't get flash angry. I do get angry, and I don't like how comfortable it feels when I do, but like the man said, anger is an energy. And when I do get there, I try and use it to make something better before the rage fades, and I wake up on a hillside wearing ripped purple pants. Egg doesn't. I don't know whether Egg can't or won't, but Egg doesn't, because Egg is broken. And all Egg can do is what Egg's always done. Sit at the back and wait for the world to end. That horrifies me, because it's familiar. It horrifies me because I've seen it in other people too. And most of all, it horrifies me because for Egg, this is a happy ending. Our final story this week comes to us from Alex Patterson and is called People Watching. It's read by Cast of Wonder's own Catherine Inskip, and here is what Alex had to say about the story. This story is a little bit about people who write stories. There's something predatory about watching people as they go about their day and trying to extract inspiration from them. Predatory or truthful? Let's find out.
People Watching by Alex Patterson, narrated by Catherine Inskip. It looked almost like a man. Enough that I couldn't blame anyone else for missing it. It wasn't hiding. It was just sat there, hand not quite touching a warm cup of coffee on a cold, bright day. I think it was doing what I like to do. I think it was watching people, seeing what it could work out about them. I did not let it know that I saw it. I did not know what it was. You never know exactly what they are. There's no handy-dandy set of rules like you get in the movies. Just something that looks like a person, that does some of the things a person does. Something that chooses people, that does something terrible to them. This thing had a warm coat and a cap and big shiny sunglasses. It had undersized ears and big bee-stung lips. I don't think anyone else noticed the pale grey line that ran down its long nose, across those plump lips, disappearing somewhere under its chin. I imagine that line is where it splits open. I imagine that there are cat-claw teeth all the way up the sides. I had nearly finished my drink when I realised it had not moved, not sipped the cooling coffee in front of it. It still held its hands close, not quite touching the mug. The fingers on those big hands shone, plump as sausages, the fingernails blunt and white at the tips. I had to finish my coffee before I left. If I left too quickly, or if I let it know I saw it, it would follow me, try to do something to me, and you never know exactly what they'll try to do. When I left, I pulled my coat on and picked up my bag, and didn't look at it. I pretended not to see when it gave me a half nod, a professional's thanks for a professional's courtesy. I would have blushed if I could blush. It had known I was there all along. I found a different coffee shop and double-checked my makeup before sitting down with a cup of tea. My breath was fast. It had known I was there all along. The other things I've met, the things that look like people, have not been terribly gracious. But this thing knew me, knew that I knew what it was, and it didn't try to force me out or follow me. This is a large town, big enough, if we are clever, for two. It was hard not to smile. I can't, of course. Smiling gives me away, but it is a long time since I have shared my territory with such a gentleman.
I think a lot about being an outsider. I was 6 foot by the time I was 11 or 12. I looked older than I was for a long time. I was smart in an environment where being physical was preferred. I was a teacher's kid and therefore simultaneously untouchable and a target. I was a geek. I was clever. I liked being funny. I liked being an outsider, I told myself. Later, as an adult, I'd throw that need to be an outsider, or perhaps that lack of faith in my ability to participate, into a lot of areas of my life. I worked retail, where friends got office jobs. I trained in a martial art, perpetually terrified of hurting an opponent when, in the end, an opponent hurt me. I wrote, because when you write, you place the world at one remove and lie to yourself about how you can control it, how you can see what's coming. I have a brain that is hardwired for narrative analysis and pattern recognition. I have had friends and family express rank astonishment that those skills never led me to the intelligence services, and every time that happens, I've never quite known whether to be relieved or frightened that they didn't. I have loving friends and family. I have an amazing partner who I love with every atom of my being. I have a company which is a family and the best job in the world. Hi, it's this one. And still, there are days, at times, as I said earlier, more than I would have liked in this garbage fire of a year, where I feel like an outsider. There are days where I imagine the joy of being someone else, of having a different set of problems. I wonder for a second what that feels like, but I know where it ends up. You follow that path all the way to the end of the line, and it ends up in incel communities and circles of rhetorical hate. It ends with the arrogance of the outsider rather than the safety of it. It ends with nothing good and begins with the curdling and souring of community itself. You're just like me. Let us hurt them. Not for me. Not today. Not ever. And so expertly portrayed here, as well as read. Thank you to all our incredible authors and our incredible narrators. We rely on you to pay our authors and our narrators and our servers, and cover all our costs, and there are really 3 ways you can do this. The first is to signal boost. If you can't afford to contribute financially, and we totally get that if you can't, then you can either tweet a link to a story that you especially liked, write a blog post about it, leave a review for us on Google or on iTunes, rate us on Spotify. Several of our shows are up there now, the others should be on the way very shortly. Write a blog post, have us on for an interview, all that good stuff. We love doing this kind of thing, so if you want to talk to us, please get in touch. Alternatively, if you can contribute financially, then there are 2 ways you can do that. The first is through Patreon, where for as little as $5 a month, you will get full access to the exclusive audio show that I do there with Karen Bovenmeyer, as well as a bunch of other material. Alternatively, if you want to do it through PayPal, again, you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month, and that gets you access, as does Patreon, to our premium content bucket. There's a hell of a lot of stuff in there, believe me. So, those are the ways that you can help. If you can, please do. If you feel like you can't, then don't worry. So, we'll be back next week, when, as now, we will be a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. And we will return in December with another fantastic set of nightmares for you. And we leave you this week with this quote from Pump Up the Volume. Quitting will not make you strong. Living will. Thank you, folks. We'll see you next week.
It's a pseudopod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.